Hello again. It's Sunday afternoon, which is unexpectedly quiet because we called off our afternoon of sitting in the garden with friends because it was pouring down all morning up until the very minute that people were due. There was lightning, symbols for lightning on the BBC weather app. So we decided to text everybody and tell them not to come. We'd bought loads of food and booze. And then the sun came out. Anyway, I think actually the weather's changing again, so it's probably just as well. I cooked some lunch instead and finished reading Helene Hanff, which I sat reading all day yesterday and all evening and most of today. It's a 2-book volume. I first read this pair of books in 2009. I just looked back and saw, although I might have read 84 Charing Cross Road back in the 90s, I think I might have. I hadn't read the sequel until 2009. The sequel is The Duchess of Bloomsbury Street, which came out a couple of years after the first book, when our New York writer eventually gets to go to London and visit the empty shell of the bookshop that she wrote to, and meet the surviving family of the bookseller that she wrote to, and visit all the places that she knows from English literature, the Tower of London, the pub where Shakespeare drank, and various places, palaces and towers and funny corners of London. And she stays in a hotel in Bloomsbury and is taken about the town by a whole bunch of fans, people who've written to her because of 84 Charing Cross Road. Joyce Grenfell, I'd forgotten, is a guest character in this book. She gets in touch and takes Helen to the theatre to see A Midsummer Night's Dream, and she takes her to dinner and invites her round her flat to meet Reggie and look at all the pictures and hear all of her stories. Very odd to have books overlapping like that. One of my favourite books is a biography of Joyce Grenfell by, I think, her niece. Is it Janie Hampton, that I read one Christmas? And so I'm used to her flat and her life. It's very odd, which is the Helene Hanff thing, isn't it? These people in books become your friends, even across decades or even centuries. You know them, as she knows these people, like when she goes to the National Portrait Gallery and looks into the faces of people she knows from literature and feels like she's being introduced to them. Anyway, it's 15 years since I read this, and I loved it even more. It had a strong place in my memory. I even had a touch of false memory about it. I seem to remember a scene in which she goes to a party held in the empty bookshop and is pushed aside by everybody's keenness to party and hobnob. She's kind of elbowed by hobnobbers and drinkers. I mean, that's not in the book. Where have I remembered that from? Is it in the film, I wonder? Although I don't think that's true either. I've either invented it or taken it from a different book and dropped it into the memory of this one, which is very curious. That's one of the funny things about rereading. You realise how much you embellish or editorialise what you've read. I wish my copy was nicer. This is a Virago paperback from a few years ago. It's nice enough, but I was looking up to see if I could get a fancier copy. Terrible. I read books to try and create some space on my shelves, and I end up buying more. I'm looking at hardbacks of this. I looked up I think it's the Manderley Press, who did the beautiful edition of Hanff's Letters from New York, that my friend Nick got me for Christmas last year, the most beautiful edition. And I asked them, was there any chance of them doing this in hardback? And they replied immediately on Twitter, referring me to Slightly Foxed Books, who apparently did do an edition of this in hardback. Although I'm looking into that and almost stopping myself at the last minute from buying it, because I already have about 4 editions of this. It'd be nice to have a nice hardback, because it really has become a favourite, which means I have to have a fancy edition of it. But with other books, it's like reading the Andre Aciman book, Find Me. I'm looking at what is coming out next, or what has come out since, by him, and stopping myself just in time from ordering more. There's a lovely bit where Helene Hanff talks about house cleaning her books, and it makes complete sense. She is so sensible and not at all a hoarder. And she talks about getting rid of books. She says, this is back in 1952, I house clean my books every spring and throw out those I'm never going to read again, like I throw out clothes I'm never going to wear again. It shocks everybody. My friends are peculiar about books. They read all the bestsellers. They get through them as fast as possible. I think they skip a bit. And they never read anything a second time, so they don't remember a word of it a year later. But they are profoundly shocked to see me drop a book in the wastebasket or give it away. The way they look at it, you buy a book, you read it, you put it on the shelf, and you never open it again for the rest of your life. But you don't throw it out, not if it has a hard cover on it. Why not? I personally can't think of anything less sacrosanct than a bad book, or even a mediocre book. I love the way she talks about books. And she's only got 3 shelves. She has a very small apartment. It makes complete sense that she would, over years, have evolved a wonderful and ingenious method of deciding what she needs to keep. Later on, she talks about knowing books almost off by heart, and how she feels ashamed of not being as well read as people like Joyce Grenfell, who tells her that she gets up at 6 a.m. to read for an hour before getting out of bed, because it's the only chance she'll get to read. And Helene Hanff says that she has read less widely than people she knows, but deeper. She doesn't say deeper, but the implication is there, because for every 50 books they might have read, she's read 1, but she's read it 50 times. And when she's in, for example, in St. Paul's Cathedral, she can repeat verbatim a sequence from the life of John Donne, and gives us the whole paragraph. And she claims to know it all off by heart. And she says she reads and reads things again and again, and has to stop herself sometimes because she realizes she has these things off by heart. It'd be amazing to have that kind of memory. Is it eidetic? I don't know how you pronounce it. When I was dipping into Edmund Gordon's Life of Angela Carter yesterday, he brings in Lorna Sage as a character, of course, at some point in the 70s, and conjures up Lorna, who we knew very well, of course, in Norwich, and he does a good job, but he talks about her eidetic or eidetic memory, which I suppose I'd been aware of. I don't know if it's the same as a photographic memory. Perhaps it is. For myself, I remember details in a particular way, and I trust my memory to gather up things that are useful or give the kind of fabric and texture of a piece of writing. So in Helene Hanff, it's often the food that I remember. She talks quite a lot about the meals she goes out and has. and detail to do with characters. It's interesting what fell away, though, from this, the fact that I didn't remember the appearance by Joyce Grenfell, or the fact that a lot of time is spent sitting in Russell Square posing for a painting by this young portrait artist Ina, and I'd forgotten her gentleman suitors. She's got two rather posh old men who run about the town with her. It has a touch, I guess, of Paul Gallico and Flowers for Mrs. Harris. Very similar plot in some ways. The publicist character at Andre Deutsch, the publisher, a few doors down from where Helen is staying in a hotel. And this is the person who organises her diary and sends her out for interviews, and is very charming and young, and referred to as Carmen. And I looked it up, and it was in fact Carmen Khalil, who later went on to become a kind of publishing czarina and started Virago Books, and actually which led to the reprint of this in this edition. Which is interesting to find out, to see her kind of being so helpful and nice to Helene Hanff. I know lots of people who revered Carmen Khalil, who died a couple of years ago, I think. I met her twice and she was rude and awful both times, I have to say. But then lots of people are, aren't they? When you meet them at dues. Helene Hanff is kind of gathered up very nicely in this by the people around her. When she touches down, there are a few moments of tension, and she plays them down. She does have a bit of a tantrum at one point when her well-meaning friends take her to the wrong places. When she's in Oxford, she has things she wants to see. You get the sense that she's someone who knows her own mind and is used to getting places under her own steam, and you could imagine her digging in her heels and being a bit difficult. But it's that just adds to it. She isn't Mrs. Harris in Paul Gallico's book. She's a bit spikier and more cussed, I think is the old-fashioned American term. She's more awkward than that. I like the fact that when she meets Frank Dole's family and keeps having to go to supper with them, you get the sense that she's seen enough of them, really. And when it comes to a party of second-hand booksellers organised for her by Frank's widow, it doesn't go particularly well. And between the lines, you can see that she's not really enjoying some of those moments. There's an interesting scene when Frank's widow tells her she was kind of jealous of her getting all of this attention when her letters arrived, and he would bring them home from the shop and read them to the family. And I remember the letters that the wife, whose name I forget, the Irish woman, terrible with names, she says in a letter to Helen in the 60s how poor she is at writing, unlike Frank. And there's something very touching in that. Because the thing that's brought all these characters together is these letters and people being able to cross distances just by the act or the knack of giving a good account of themselves on the page, feeling at home in language, and that being the thing that draws these people together. There's a woman late on who knows Helen in New York that she bumps into by chance. She's somebody with a dress shop who doesn't see Hanff as anybody special and is amazed at the treatment she's getting and quite envious. Anyway, that's me rambling about this. I think it's a really wonderful book. I always knew 84 Charing Cross Road was a wonderful book, and I have returned to it, and I've returned to the movie again and again. I should check out to see if there's a nice audio book because that would be nice. There must be somewhere an archive in which there are more letters, because there are big gaps in the correspondence. It might just be that they went astray and that was it. Anyway, why do I always end up wanting more from books I love? So I knew the first one was great, but I think I enjoy reading The Duchess even more. I'm going to stop there, and I will see you again soon in the next episode.